I keep this little pawn ticket because it's the reason you had dinner when there shouldn't have been any. Look at my hand a second. See that pale line on my ring finger? Like a ghost of something that used to live there. I'm not wearing it because I can't. Not because I don't want to. People think a ring is just metal. A circle. A little shine. But that ring was a promise, and later, it was groceries. And before I finish this story, you'll know exactly what that ring meant, why I walked into a pawn shop with it hidden in my pocket, and how that one choice changed our family in ways you didn't see until now. I didn't tell the full truth back then. I was too proud. Too scared. And, if I'm being honest, too tired to explain. Have you ever held something precious and realized it's the only thing standing between your children and an empty plate? I'm sitting at this table because you asked about my jewelry box last week. You remember, when you were helping me clean out that bottom drawer. You lifted the lid like you were opening a treasure chest. And you found what was left, a few bent earrings, a chain with a broken clasp, and an empty ring box that still smells faintly like old perfume and cardboard. You didn't mean to look so confused. But you did. And then you said the words I wasn't ready for, Grandma, where's your wedding ring? I laughed like it was nothing. I said something quick, something neat and polite. Oh, honey, I lost it years ago. But my hand went under the table all on its own, like it wanted to hide the truth. That night, after everyone left, I went to the kitchen and opened the old cookbook I keep for comfort. The one with the grease stain on page 72. And tucked inside it, flat as a pressed leaf, was the pawn ticket I thought I'd thrown away. I stared at it until the kitchen clock sounded too loud. That little slip of paper had my name on it, a date, and a number that meant something once. And I realized, if I didn't tell you now, I'd carry it to the grave like a stone in my pocket. So let me take you back. Back to when that ring was love, not survival. He gave it to me on a Tuesday. Not romantic, not dramatic. Just honest. Like him. Frank came home from the mill with sawdust in his hair and a tired grin that made you forgive the whole world. He washed his hands at the sink, forearms still wet, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a little blue velvet box that looked too fancy for our tiny kitchen. He didn't kneel. We didn't have room between the table and the stove. He just took my left hand like it mattered. He said, Evie, I can't give you much. But I can give you a life where you'll never wonder if you're loved. And then he opened that box and there it was, a thin gold band with a small stone that caught the light like it was saving sunshine for later. I used to turn it when I was nervous. Thumb over the stone, like rubbing a worry smooth. When the babies came, I'd tap it against their little hands and joke, this is Mommy's magic ring. On birthdays, I'd hold my hand up like a movie star, just to make Frank laugh. He'd roll his eyes and call me fancy. And at Christmas, when we couldn't afford much, I'd still wear it while I stirred gravy, because it made me feel like we were going to be all right. That's what a ring can do. It can convince you the roof won't leak and the paycheck won't run out. Until the day it does. It started with a cough. Then a missed shift. Then a doctor's visit we couldn't afford. Frank tried to act like it was nothing, but I heard him at night, coughing into the pillow so the kids wouldn't wake up. One envelope came in the mail with red letters. Then another. Then another. And suddenly the ring wasn't just a pretty thing on my finger. It was a number. A possibility. Have you ever watched your life shrink down to the space between two bills on a kitchen counter? The pantry got louder because it was so empty. That's the only way I can describe it. When you opened the cabinet, the door creaked like it was complaining, and inside there was a half bag of flour, salt, and a can of green beans we were saving. The kids didn't understand saving. They understood hungry. I started slicing things thinner. One pork chop became 3 portions. One apple became wedges that had to look generous on a plate. At night, Frank and I would whisper in the kitchen like we were planning a crime. He'd say, maybe next week they'll put me back on full time. And I'd say, maybe, even when I knew the mill was cutting men loose like they were scraps. The worst part wasn't the hunger. It was the pretending. Mom, I'm still hungry. Well, sweetheart, you ate already. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. That kind of lie leaves a stain you can't bleach out. One afternoon I found our oldest counting coins on the living room rug. Pennies, nickels, dimes, all lined up like little soldiers. He looked up and said, "Is this enough for bread?" I wanted to scoop him up and cry into his hair. Instead, I smiled too wide and said, "Oh, honey, that's for your piggy bank." Then I went into the bathroom and shut the door so nobody could hear my breathing change. Frank hated help. Not just disliked it, hated it. He said, "We're not those people." And I'd say, "What people?" And he'd go quiet because he didn't have an answer that didn't sound cruel. I tried calling my sister once. I got as far as, "Things are tight," and my throat closed up like a fist. Pride is a funny thing. It'll let you starve politely. Then one day, tucked between a laundromat flyer and a church bulletin, I saw an ad, "Cash for gold. Pawn loans." The paper felt thin in my hand, but the idea felt heavy. I folded that little ad and put it in my wallet like it was just information. Like I was a responsible woman planning ahead. But every time the kids asked for seconds, I felt it burning against my palm. That Friday night, the children went to bed early because there was nothing to do and not enough to eat. Frank fell asleep in his chair with the TV on low, one hand on his chest like he could hold himself together. I sat at the table with my jewelry box open. The ring looked small. Innocent. It didn't look like a meal. It didn't look like heat in the furnace. But it could become those things. My fingers closed around it, and for a second I thought, if I put it back, maybe everything will fix itself by morning. And then I heard the youngest cough in his sleep, and I knew morning wasn't going to fix anything. So I put the ring in my coat pocket and didn't tell a soul. The next day was cold enough to make the air feel sharp. The kind of cold that turns your breath into proof you're still here. I left after Frank went outside to check the car, even though we both knew the car wasn't the problem. The ring pressed into my pocket like a secret. Every step made it shift against my knuckles. I walked past the bakery where I used to buy donuts for the kids on payday. The smell came out the door like a tease. I walked past the hardware store where Frank used to stop and talk like he had time to be a man with hobbies. And I kept going because stopping would have meant thinking, and thinking would have meant turning around. Do you know what it feels like to try not to cry in public when you're grown and you're supposed to have it together? The pawn shop sign flickered like it couldn't commit to being open. One letter buzzed, then steadied. The windows had bars, and behind the glass were guitars, old tools, a dusty TV, and jewelry that looked like it had stories it didn't want to tell. When I pushed the door, a bell rang, bright and cheerful, like it didn't belong in a place like that. The air smelled like metal and old carpet. A man behind the counter looked up. He wasn't mean. That was almost worse. He had the tired eyes of someone who's watched people swallow their pride all day long. He said, "What can I do for you, ma'am?" And my voice tried to fail me. But I made it work. "I need a loan." He held out his hand. I pulled the ring from my pocket and set it on the glass. It made the softest sound, just a tiny click. That click was louder in my chest than it was in the room. He picked it up, turned it under a lamp, squinted, then wrote something down without looking at me. "Stones small," he said. "Bands thin." I wanted to say, that ring held my whole life. But pawn shops don't buy lives. They buy weight. He named a number. It was less than I'd imagined, less than the ring deserved, less than Frank would have believed. My fingers curled into my coat lining so I wouldn't snatch the ring back. I asked, "Is that the best you can do?" My voice sounded steadier than my insides. He paused, looked at me, really looked, and raised it a little, like he understood this wasn't shopping. This was survival. Then he slid a paper across the counter. "Sign here. You've got 30 days to redeem it." 30 days. Like hunger waits politely on a calendar. I stared at the line where my name would go. It felt like the last step off a safe porch into dark air. And I signed anyway. Because my babies needed to eat. When he put the ring in a small envelope and disappeared it under the counter, I felt something in me go quiet. Not dead. Just sealed up. Like a jar you twist shut so nothing spills out in front of strangers. He counted the bills into my hand. The money was warm from his drawer. I folded it once, then twice, and tucked it deep into my wallet like it could crawl away if I didn't hold it tight. Outside, the cold hit my face and I realized my cheeks were wet. I hadn't even felt the tears start. And still, I kept walking. At the grocery store, I didn't browse. I marched. Like I was on a mission. I grabbed bread, 2 loaves. Peanut butter. Eggs. Milk. A bag of rice that felt like a newborn in my arms. I picked up ground beef even though it was expensive, because I wanted them to see brown meat in a pan again and believe the world hadn't ended. I added apples. Not because we needed them, but because they were bright and I was desperate for something bright. I stood in the cereal aisle for a long moment, arguing with myself. Name brand or generic? Pride is ridiculous in the cereal aisle. I chose the cheaper box and told myself the kids wouldn't care. At the register, when the total came up, my stomach clenched like it always did. But this time my wallet had enough. And that feeling, relief, was so strong it almost looked like joy. The grocery bags cut into my fingers on the walk home. One bag tore, and a can rolled into the street with a clatter. I chased it like it was treasure. Because it was. When I stepped into the house, the smell of food already felt like it was in the walls, even though nothing was cooked yet. The kids came running because they heard the bags. They always heard the bags. Mom. What did you get? Is there cereal? Can we have apples now? Frank came in from outside, took one look at the counter, and his face did something I still remember. It softened and hardened at the same time. He said, "Lo, how'd you do this?" I didn't answer right away. I started putting things away like speed could save me from the truth. Finally I said, "I moved some things around." Which is what poor people say when they perform a miracle. That night, I cooked like a woman trying to erase a week of hunger with one skillet. The kids ate until their shoulders dropped and their voices got quieter, the way they do when they feel safe. At the table, my youngest looked at me and squinted. "Mom," he said, "you look different." I felt my whole body freeze. I tucked my left hand into my lap under the tablecloth. "Different how, sweetheart?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Just different." Was it my missing ring he noticed? Or was it the way relief makes your face look older for a minute? Frank watched me too, eyes flicking down once, fast. But he didn't say anything. And I didn't offer. Later, when the kids were asleep, Frank reached for my hand on the couch. His thumb brushed my bare finger, and I felt his breath change. He didn't accuse me. He didn't demand. He just whispered, "Evie," like my name was a question. I said the first lie that arrived fully formed, "It's at the jeweler." The stone was loose. And Frank nodded slowly, like he could tell it wasn't the whole story, but he didn't know how to ask without breaking something. That's how secrets survive in families. Not with big speeches. With quiet nods and unfinished sentences. Hunger makes you brave in quiet ways. 30 days to redeem it. That's what the ticket said. I kept that ticket in my wallet and touched it like a charm, like touching it could pull the ring back through time. But the mill didn't call Frank back full time. The bills didn't stop. And the furnace still needed oil. Every week was another week of choosing. Heat or shoes. Medicine or gas. Some nights I would take the pawn ticket out and smooth it on the table, flattening it with my palm like I could flatten our troubles too. Frank would watch me and then look away. We were two people in the same kitchen carrying the same fear, and somehow we still carried it alone. Do you know what shame does? It doesn't just hurt. It organizes your whole life around silence. The redemption date came and went. I didn't mark it on the calendar. I didn't say it out loud. I just woke up that morning and knew something was gone for good. A month later, Frank's sister came by and noticed my bare hand while I was pouring coffee. "Oh," she said, "too casual, no ring today." Her eyes did that quick scan people do when they're counting what you have. I smiled. "It's getting cleaned." She hummed like she didn't believe me, and the sound crawled under my skin for days. At church, I started keeping my hands busy, holding a hymnal, folding a bulletin, clasping my fingers, anything so nobody could look too long. At birthday parties, I'd cut cake and keep my left hand turned inward, like a shy child. Frank and I argued more in those years. Not loud arguments, not door slamming. The kind that stays in your voice like grit. He'd say, "We can't keep living like this." And I'd say, "Then what do you suggest?" One night, after the kids were asleep, he finally said it, "Did you sell it?" The room went so still I could hear the refrigerator hum. I told him the truth, but only halfway. I pawned it. For food. His jaw clenched. Without telling me. I expected anger. I expected him to shout. Instead his eyes got wet and he looked away fast, like tears were another bill he couldn't pay. He whispered, "I was supposed to take care of you." And I whispered back, "You did. You just couldn't that month." That conversation ended with both of us sitting in the dark, not touching, not leaving. Because sometimes love is two people failing together and still staying. Years passed. The kids grew. They got taller than the kitchen counter. Their voices changed. Their hunger changed too, from food to dreams. And we kept feeding them, one way or another. On your mother's high school graduation, she wore a dress we bought on clearance. She looked like a movie star anyway. I clapped until my palms stung, and then I looked down at my bare finger and thought, this is what the ring became. Not jewelry. A chance. At Christmas, when we finally had enough for presents again, Frank bought me a cheap gold-plated band from a department store. He put it on my finger gently, like it might apologize for the years we lost. But it turned my skin green by New Year's, and I took it off without saying a word. I never replaced the real one. I told myself I didn't need it. But some nights, when the house was quiet, I'd rub that pale line on my finger and feel the shape of what wasn't there. Some sacrifices don't end, they just get quiet. And then we come back to last week. To you in my kitchen, opening drawers like a curious little detective. To that empty ring box. To your question. After you left, I found the pawn ticket in my cookbook. I don't even remember tucking it there. Maybe I did it on purpose. Maybe part of me wanted to be caught. Because I'm older now, and the truth feels lighter than the hiding. So the next time you came over, I made tea and sat you right here at this table. I put the pawn ticket between us like a photograph at a funeral. Your eyes went wide. "Grandma, is this?" And I nodded before you finished. You asked, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" That question landed in my chest and stayed there. Why didn't I tell? Because telling would have meant admitting we were drowning. Because I didn't want the kids to look at their father like he was failing. Because I didn't want anyone's pity sitting at our table. And because a mother will do almost anything if it means her children can keep believing the world is steady. You looked down at my hand again, like you could see the past on my skin. And then you said something that surprised me. You said, "I'm sorry you carried that alone." That's when my throat tightened. Not from shame this time. From being seen. Isn't it strange, how you can survive the hunger, but being understood is what finally makes you cry? Your mother came over later, and then your uncle. Adult faces, serious eyes. I told the story again, slower, with all the parts one used to skip. The empty pantry. The coins on the rug. The bell over the pawn shop door. The click of the ring on the glass. Your uncle rubbed his forehead and said, I remember being hungry, but I didn't know it was like that. Your mother stared at the ticket like it was a map to a place she'd been but forgot. She whispered, "You should have asked us for help." I almost laughed. "Sweetheart," I said, "you were 10. But then I softened my voice. "And besides, I didn't want you to feel like you owed your childhood to a piece of jewelry." Frank's been gone a long time now. But I could feel him in the room when we talked about it. Not his anger. Not his pride. Just his love, sitting quietly beside mine. Your mother reached across the table and took my bare hand. She turned it over, palm up, like she was reading my lifelines. She said, "That ring deserved better." And I told her the truth that took me years to learn: the ring did fine. It kept you alive. A week after that conversation, you all did something I didn't expect. You came over with a small box. Not blue velvet. Plain white. The kind that doesn't pretend. Inside was a simple ring. Nothing flashy. Just a clean band with a tiny engraving on the inside: "We carry it together." And for a moment I couldn't breathe, because the words hit the exact wound they were meant to heal. I didn't put it on right away. I held it in my palm and felt its weight. Not heavy. Just certain. And I thought about that day in the pawn shop, how I handed my love to a stranger behind glass. This ring wasn't replacing the old one. It wasn't pretending the past didn't happen. It was you telling me the past is finally shared. We framed the pawn ticket too. Not because it's pretty, but because it's honest. It's proof that someone loved you enough to trade beauty for bread. What do we inherit from an empty hand? Not the gold. Not the stone. We inherit the kind of love that does the hard thing quietly. And listen to me, if you take anything from this story, take this: don't let one person become the family's secret keeper. Don't let pride make you lonely. Let people love you while you're still here to feel it. Because that ring is gone. I never got it back. Some other woman might have worn it to a dance. Some stranger might have given it as a promise that didn't know my name. And that used to hurt. But now, when I look at this pale line on my finger, I don't just see loss. I see the full table. I see the kids' cheeks finally round again. I see Frank watching them eat with relief he didn't know how to say. I see a mother walking through cold air with a secret in her pocket and love in her spine. Love isn't what you keep. It's what you give. And if this story sat with you, if it reminded you of someone who carried too much, tap like and tell me you were here. It helps this little corner of the internet find the right hearts. And if you want more grandmother style, slow burn family stories about the things people sacrifice without applause, subscribe to Dust of Old Days. Alright. That's enough for one night. I'm going to fold this ticket back into the cookbook, not as a secret anymore, but as a reminder. Because some families pass down jewelry. And some families pass down the reason they survived.